Pack your things. You're done here. Mr. Richardson's voice cut through the humming servers of the IT department like a blade. His arms were crossed. His face twisted into that expression Lily had seen before. The one that said he'd been waiting for this moment. Around them, the operations control room of Denver International Airport buzzed with activity. Screens displayed flight schedules, security feeds, baggage tracking systems. Everything that kept one of America's busiest airports running smoothly flowed through these computers. And for the past 4 years, Lily had been the one keeping it all alive. Excuse me? Lily looked up from her workstation, fingers still hovering over the keyboard where she'd been troubleshooting a critical security patch. You heard me. Richardson stepped closer, his expensive cologne mixing with the sterile air conditioning. We're downsizing the IT department. Your position has been eliminated. My name is Lily Chen, and I'm 29 years old. That morning, I woke up thinking it would be just another Tuesday. Maybe fix a few router issues, update some firewall protocols, train the new intern on our backup systems. I never imagined my career of 4 years would end with a lie so poorly constructed that it insulted my intelligence. Downsizing? I kept my voice steady, professional. We just hired 3 people last month. 3 qualified people. The way he emphasized qualified made several heads turn in the open office. My colleague Jennifer pretended to focus on her screen, but I could see her jaw tighten. She knew. They all knew what this really was. 6 months earlier, Richardson had been promoted to IT director after his predecessor retired. His first meeting with the department had been enlightening. He'd walked past my desk 3 times before finally asking, "Where's the senior systems administrator?" I was sitting right there, nameplate and all. When I raised my hand, the disappointment on his face was almost comical. "But you should have received my performance reviews," I continued, pulling up my employee file on the screen. I have the highest efficiency rating in the department. I built the entire disaster recovery system we're using. I'm the only one certified in. I don't need to explain my decisions to you. Richardson's face flushed red. Behind him, Tom from Security Systems shot me a look that said, "Don't push it. HR will process your final paycheck. You have 1 hour to clear out." 1 hour. 4 years of 60-hour weeks, of coming in during Christmas to fix crashed servers, of building systems so efficient that the airport saved millions in operational costs, reduced to 1 hour with a cardboard box. "I'll need to do a proper handover," I said carefully. "The security protocols alone require. We'll figure it out." He was already turning away, clearly considering the conversation finished. "Johnson will take over your responsibilities." Johnson. The guy who still didn't know the difference between a router and a modem. The same person who'd asked me last week how to reset his email password. That Johnson. I glanced around the control room one final time. 23 monitors displaying real-time data from every corner of the airport. Passenger check-in systems, TSA security feeds, air traffic coordination software, baggage handling networks, employee access controls, financial transaction processors. Every single system ran through servers that I had configured, optimized, and secured. And Richardson wanted Johnson to take over. "Can I at least document the administrative access procedures?" I asked, already knowing the answer, but needing to hear him say it. "Johnson has your credentials. We're good." Richardson waved dismissively, already walking toward his office. "Stop wasting time. Security will escort you out if you're not gone in an hour." That's when I smiled. Just a little. Just enough that Jennifer noticed and her eyes went wide. See, Richardson had made a critical error, one that people like him always make. He assumed that having my credentials meant having my access. He thought the username and password taped to my desk drawer were the keys to the kingdom. What he didn't know, what none of them knew except for my former mentor who'd retired 6 months ago, was that I had built a secondary authentication layer into every critical system. Biometric scanners that required my fingerprint. 2-factor authentication linked to my personal phone. Encrypted administrative backdoors that only I could access. I'd implemented them as security enhancements over the past 2 years, and everyone had been so impressed with my initiative that they'd approved every single upgrade. I was the only person in that building who could actually control the airport's entire digital infrastructure. And Richardson, in his rush to get rid of the diversity hire he'd complained about at the last management meeting, yes, thin walls, and yes, I'd heard every word, had just locked himself out of his own systems. As I slowly began collecting my belongings, a coffee mug, a small succulent plant, a framed photo of my parents, I watched Richardson disappear into his office. Through the glass walls, I could see him already on the phone, probably calling his golf buddy in HR to celebrate getting rid of me. Jennifer rolled her chair closer, her voice barely a whisper. "Lily, I'm so sorry." "This is completely. Don't worry about it." I kept my tone light, pleasant even. My hands were steady as I unplugged my personal laptop. "Everything works out the way it's supposed to." She looked confused, started to say something else, but I just smiled and continued packing. Tom from security appeared at my cubicle exactly 47 minutes later. "Ready?" His expression was apologetic. We'd worked together on integrating the new surveillance systems last year. He knew exactly how vital I was to operations. Almost. I took one last look at my workstation, at the screen still displaying systems that would start experiencing mysterious technical difficulties in about, I checked my watch, 6 hours and 32 minutes. Right in the middle of the evening rush when 47 flights would be arriving simultaneously. If someone asked whether I'd gostando dessa historia, actually, if you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Because what happens next will show you exactly why you should never underestimate someone just because they don't look like you. As Tom walked me through the security checkpoint and out into the parking garage, my phone vibrated. An automated notification from the system I designed. Administrative password change required in 6 hours. Richardson had no idea that the clock had just started ticking. And neither did he know that the sweet, quiet IT girl he'd just fired had spent the last 6 months documenting every single racist comment, every suspicious financial transaction he'd tried to hide, every policy violation he'd committed while thinking no one was watching. The airport's cameras recorded everything, and I had access to all of it. Well, I used to have access, or did I? The rejection email arrived 3 days later. "Dear Ms. Chen, thank you for your interest in the systems administrator position at Rocky Mountain Regional Airport. Unfortunately, we have decided to move forward with other candidates whose qualifications better match our current needs." I read it twice, sitting in my cramped studio apartment with my laptop balanced on my knees. The irony was suffocating. I had designed the application system they'd used to reject me. My own code had just told me I wasn't good enough. That made 6 rejections in 72 hours. My phone buzzed. Mom calling. Again, I let it go to voicemail, already knowing what she'd say. The same thing she'd said when I told her about the firing. "Maybe you should have kept your head down. You always have to prove something." She meant well. Growing up, my parents had taught me that working twice as hard would eventually pay off. Get straight A's, master every certification. Be so undeniably competent that racism couldn't touch you. They'd immigrated from Taiwan with nothing, built a successful dry cleaning business through sheer persistence, and truly believed that excellence was armor. But armor doesn't help when someone refuses to see you're wearing it. My laptop pinged. LinkedIn message from Jennifer. "Lily, I don't know if you've heard, but the systems are having problems. Johnson can't figure out what's wrong. Richardson is losing his mind. Are you available for consulting work?" I stared at the message. Consulting work. Translation. Fix the mess they created. Get paid a fraction of what I'm worth, then watch them take credit while still not rehiring me. Below Jennifer's message, another notification. Richardson had updated his LinkedIn status. Excited to announce that Denver International has streamlined operations with a leaner, more efficient IT team. Sometimes addition through subtraction leads to innovation. Hashtag leadership, hashtag operational excellence, addition through subtraction. He was literally celebrating firing me on social media. The comments were predictable. "Great leadership, Rick. Efficiency is key in today's market. Tough decisions make strong leaders." I closed the laptop before I did something stupid like respond. My apartment suddenly felt smaller. The walls pressed in with the weight of student loans I'd taken to get my computer science degree. the savings account that would last maybe 2 months, the car payment due next week. 4 years of building my career. Gone. And for what? Because Richardson looked at me and saw someone who didn't belong. My phone rang again, this time David, my boyfriend of 6 months. Hey, so I heard about what happened, he started, his voice careful. My dad knows some people at his firm. He said he could maybe get you an interview for an administrative assistant position. I'm a senior systems administrator with multiple cybersecurity certifications, David. Not an administrative assistant. I know, but it's a foot in the door, right? And honestly, Lily, maybe IT is just really competitive right now. My dad said the assistant job has good benefits. I hung up, then immediately felt guilty. Then angry at feeling guilty. The apartment was silent, except for the refrigerator's hum. I opened my laptop again and pulled up a folder I'd been building for 3 months. Richardson_files. Inside. Screenshots, recorded security footage, email chains, financial records. All perfectly legal to access when I'd been employed. All meticulously organized. There was the footage from August 12th. Richardson in the parking garage, handing an envelope to a contractor we'd supposedly fired. The same contractor whose company kept getting airport maintenance contracts despite consistently overbidding. There were the emails from September discussing how to restructure the department to better align with traditional industry standards, corporate speak for hire more people who look like me. There were the expense reports showing Richardson billing the airport for business dinners at strip clubs. And there was my personal favorite, the security audit I conducted that showed Richardson had been accessing restricted personnel files without authorization, specifically targeting employees of color to find any policy violations he could use against them. I'd been collecting evidence since his second week as director, back when I'd still been naive enough to think HR would care. They hadn't. My phone buzzed. Another LinkedIn notification. Richardson again, this time posting a photo from inside the operations control room. Johnson stood awkwardly next to him, wearing a forced smile. The caption read, "Training the next generation of IT leadership. Proud of our team's adaptability. #teamwork, #nextgen." In the background of the photo, barely visible, you could see one of the main server monitors displaying an error message. I zoomed in. Critical system failure warning. Backup authentication offline. They were already falling apart, and it had only been 3 days. Jennifer messaged again. Lily, please. 3 flights got delayed this morning because the baggage system went down. Richardson is blaming it on routine maintenance, but we both know that's BS. He's talking about bringing in an outside consulting firm. This is getting serious. An outside consulting firm would charge them $200,000 for work I could do in an afternoon. More importantly, they'd have full access to discover exactly how incompetent Richardson actually was, or they'd just patch the immediate problems and leave, letting Richardson continue his little kingdom while I stayed unemployed. I opened a secure browser and logged into a server I'd maintained from home, perfectly legal, as it hosted my personal projects and scripts I'd developed on my own time. But this server also had a very specific connection to the airport's systems, a diagnostic bridge I'd built for remote troubleshooting during emergencies. Richardson thought he'd cut me off. He thought changing the building passwords and collecting my access badge meant I was out. He'd forgotten that digital access and physical access are 2 entirely different things. My fingers moved across the keyboard, pulling up real-time data from the airport's infrastructure. Everything still flowed to my personal monitoring system. Every login attempt, every system status, every failure. Johnson had tried to reset the master authentication protocols 17 times in the past hour. Each attempt moved him further from actually fixing anything. A new email appeared. Subject line: Final paycheck and separation agreement. I opened it. Standard severance package. 2 weeks pay. But attached was a document, non-disparagement and confidentiality agreement. They wanted me to sign away my right to discuss anything about my employment, the circumstances of my termination, or Richardson's management. The severance was contingent on signing. 2 weeks pay in exchange for my silence about everything I'd witnessed and documented. I thought about my parents' dry cleaning business, about how they'd smiled through every microaggression. Every customer who'd accused them of shrinking clothes or stealing quarters from pockets. They'd survived by staying quiet, by not making waves. They'd wanted better for me. That's why they'd worked 16-hour days to pay for my education. My cursor hovered over the document. All I had to do was sign, take the money, and disappear quietly. Keep my head down like Mom always said. Instead, I opened a new document and started typing. Not my signature on their agreement. Something else entirely. A detailed timeline of every system I'd built for the airport. Every vulnerability I'd patched. Every efficiency I'd created. And most importantly, every single administrative access point that Richardson now believed he controlled. My phone buzzed again. This time, unknown number. Ms. Chun? This is Attorney Margaret Whitmore from the Colorado Civil Rights Division. I received an interesting anonymous tip about potential discrimination at Denver International Airport. Would you be available to discuss your recent termination? I smiled for the first time in 3 days. Because while Richardson had been busy posting on LinkedIn and training his incompetent replacement, I'd been busy too. That anonymous tip? Yeah, that was me. Last night, at 2 a.m., unable to sleep, I'd filled out the entire civil rights complaint form. Attached every piece of documentation. Named every witness. Yes, I told Attorney Whitmore. I'm very available. Through my laptop screen, I watched the airport's systems continue their slow cascade of failures. Nothing catastrophic yet. Just annoying enough that Richardson would be fielding angry calls from airline executives. Just inconvenient enough that he'd start to panic. Just visible enough that people would start asking questions about why everything worked perfectly until I left. But here's what Richardson didn't realize yet. What would keep him up at night once he figured it out? I hadn't caused any of these failures. I hadn't touched a single line of code since walking out of that building. The systems were failing because they'd been held together by my constant attention, my daily maintenance, my expertise. Take me out of the equation, and everything I'd been quietly fixing for 4 years started breaking all at once. Natural consequences have a beauty that revenge never quite captures. So, Miss Chen, Attorney Whitmore continued, I'm looking at your complaint. You mentioned you have video evidence? I pulled up the folder of security footage. Hours and hours of it. Yes, I said. I have quite a bit of evidence. And somewhere across town, in his corner office with its view of the runway, Richardson was probably just starting to understand that firing me had been the beginning of something, not the end. The question wasn't whether he'd regret it. The question was how much. Attorney Margaret Whitmore's office smelled like old books and strong coffee. She was younger than I expected, maybe 40, with sharp eyes that missed nothing as she reviewed the documents spread across her conference table. This is extensive. She tapped a printed email chain. How long were you documenting? 3 months actively. But I have system logs going back 2 years. I pulled up my laptop. Everything's time-stamped and backed up in 3 separate locations. Margaret raised an eyebrow. You knew this was coming. I knew something was coming. Richardson made it clear from day one that I didn't fit his vision for the department. I opened a video file. This is from his first staff meeting as director. On screen, Richardson addressed the IT team. When he reached the section about maintaining departmental culture and standards, his eyes deliberately skipped over me to focus on the 3 white male engineers behind me. Subtle, Margaret murmured, but effective in court. What else? I showed her everything. The parking garage footage, the falsified expense reports, the unauthorized access to personnel files. By the 3rd video, she was taking notes rapidly. Ms. Chun, I have to ask, how did you access all of this security footage after termination? I didn't access anything after termination. Everything here was obtained while I was employed, through systems I was authorized to monitor. I met her eyes. I was the senior administrator. Monitoring security feeds was literally my job. She smiled. Actually smiled. You're going to be a very good witness. Now tell me about the system's failures. Over the next hour, I explained the technical architecture of the airport's IT infrastructure. How I'd built redundancy into every critical system. How those systems required specific maintenance protocols that only I fully understood. How Richardson's decision to fire me was now costing the airport approximately $50,000 per day in delayed flights, overtime for manual workarounds, and emergency IT consulting fees. And you haven't sabotaged anything? Margaret asked directly. I haven't touched their systems since I left the building. I don't need to. I pulled up a projection model I created. This spreadsheet shows predicted failure points based on deferred maintenance. Everything currently breaking is exactly what I told Richardson would break if we didn't stay on top of updates. Margaret studied the spreadsheet, then looked at me with something like awe. You documented your own indispensability. I documented best practices that my director chose to ignore. My phone buzzed. Text from Jennifer. Lily, please call me. Emergency. System-wide crash this morning. They brought in TechCorp Consulting. $15,000 day. Richardson is freaking out. I showed Margaret the message. Don't respond yet, she advised. Let me make some calls first. The Civil Rights Division will want to interview you formally, but I think we can move faster if we coordinate with the airport's legal department directly. You think they'll settle? I think once their legal team sees this evidence and realizes how much Richardson has exposed them to liability, both for discrimination and financial negligence, they'll want this resolved quickly. She gathered the documents. Go home. Don't contact anyone at the airport. I'll call you by end of day. I left her office feeling something I hadn't felt in a week. Hope. But hope doesn't pay rent. That afternoon, I sat in my apartment calculating how long my savings would last. 6 weeks, maybe 8 if I was careful. My parents had offered to help, but taking money from them felt like admitting they'd been right. That I should have kept quiet, been grateful, not rocked the boat. My laptop chimed. Email from David. Hey, can we talk? My parents are asking questions about your situation, and honestly, it's getting awkward. Maybe we should take a break until things settle down? I read it 3 times, trying to find hidden meaning that wasn't there. He was embarrassed by me. By my situation. His parents, who'd met me exactly twice, had decided an unemployed woman with a discrimination case was bad for their son's image. I typed a response. A break sounds permanent. Let's just call this what it is. Good luck with everything. Send. Delete contact. Block number. Done. The apartment felt even quieter now. My phone rang. Margaret Whitmore. Lily, I've had a very interesting afternoon. Denver International's legal counsel wants to meet. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. They're calling it a preliminary discussion. That was fast. It was. Which tells me they're more worried than they're letting on. I also received a call from someone named James Patterson. Says he was your mentor before he retired. James. I hadn't spoken to him since his retirement party 6 months ago, right before Richardson took over. He wants to testify as an expert witness. Margaret continued. Says he can speak to your qualifications, your contributions to the airport's infrastructure. And this is interesting. He has documentation of complaints he filed about Richardson's hiring practices before he left. James complained about Richardson? Apparently he saw which way the wind was blowing and tried to warn HR. They ignored him. He's kept every email. Margaret's voice carried a smile. We're building quite a case here. After we hung up, I called James immediately. Lily Chen. His familiar gravelly voice warmed something in my chest. I was wondering when I'd hear from you. You're testifying for me? Damn right I am. I spent 30 years building that IT department. Hired you personally because you were the best candidate I'd seen in a decade. Then I retire and 6 months later Richardson destroys everything? He sighed heavily. I should have fought harder before I left. This is my chance to make it right. James, you don't have to listen to me. That airport runs because of systems you designed. Richardson is an incompetent bigot who got promoted because he plays golf with the right people. He's tanking a critical infrastructure operation because of his ego. His voice hardened. I'm not letting that stand. Besides, my retirement is boring. I need a project. We talked for an hour. He'd been following the system's failures from afar, had even contacted former colleagues still working there. The situation was worse than I'd realized. The TSA is getting involved, James said. 3 security checkpoint failures in 1 week? That's a federal issue. And the FAA is asking questions about the air traffic coordination glitches. How bad? Bad enough that Richardson might be facing more than a discrimination lawsuit. If federal regulators find operational negligence, he let that hang. After we finished talking, I opened my laptop and did something I'd been avoiding. I looked at the airport's systems. Not to interfere, just to observe. The diagnostic bridge I'd built still worked. Data flowed to my monitoring screens like it always had. And what I saw made my stomach drop. Johnson had attempted to install a security patch. The wrong security patch. To the wrong system. He'd essentially opened a vulnerability in the passenger data network that any moderately skilled hacker could exploit. Credit card information, passport numbers, TS pre-check details. All sitting behind a compromised firewall. I stared at the screen, hands frozen above the keyboard. If I reported this, I'd be helping them, helping Richardson. Proving that they still needed me while simultaneously letting them off the hook. If I didn't report it, and there was a data breach, thousands of passengers could have their information stolen. This wasn't about revenge anymore. I picked up the phone and called Margaret. I need to report a critical security vulnerability at the airport, not as their former employee. As a concerned cybersecurity professional who discovered a potential threat to public safety, tell me everything, I explained the situation. The compromised firewall. The passenger data at risk. How this wasn't about my case. This was about preventing a potential disaster that would affect thousands of people. I'll contact the airport's legal team immediately, Margaret said. This changes things. If you're actively trying to prevent a security breach despite your termination, it demonstrates professionalism and ethical responsibility. It also shows that their current IT leadership is dangerously incompetent. Margaret, I don't want credit for this. I just want it fixed. I understand. But Lily? Her voice softened. The fact that you're prioritizing passenger safety over your own anger. That's going to matter. In court, in settlement negotiations, and everything. That night, I received an email from an address I didn't recognize. Subject line. Thank you. Miss Chen. You don't know me, but I'm one of the TSA supervisors at DIA. I heard through back channels about your situation and wanted you to know that many of us noticed when you left. Things that used to work smoothly now don't. Problems you fix quietly now escalate into crises. Richardson is taking credit for your work and blaming you for his failures. Some of us have been documenting the decline. If you need witnesses to how critical your role was, you have them. We remember who actually kept this place running. Agent Marcus Williams. I read it twice, then 3 times. They remembered. Not everyone had stayed silent. Not everyone had looked away. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Jennifer. Richardson just got called into an emergency meeting with the airport director and federal regulators. Word is they found a major security flaw. People are saying you reported it. Did you really help them after everything? I didn't respond, but I smiled. Because Richardson was about to learn something important. The difference between revenge and justice is that justice doesn't require you to become someone you're not. And somewhere in a panicked conference room, surrounded by regulators and lawyers and executives all demanding answers, Richardson was finally beginning to understand the magnitude of his mistake. The systems were failing. Federal investigators were circling. His hand-picked replacement had created a security crisis. And the one person who could fix everything, who had the expertise, the access, and the knowledge, was the same person he'd fired for not looking like his idea of what an IT professional should be. Tomorrow's meeting was going to be very interesting. The conference room on the executive floor was designed to intimidate. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the runways. A table that could seat 20 and enough leather and mahogany to furnish a law firm. Richardson sat at one end, his expensive suit unable to hide the sweat stains forming under his arms. Across from him, the airport's executive director, 2 attorneys, a federal cybersecurity investigator, and a representative from the FAA, and me. Margaret had insisted I attend as a technical consultant for the investigation. Richardson's face when I walked in was worth every sleepless night of the past 2 weeks. Miss Chun, the executive director, Patricia Morrison, gestured to a seat. Thank you for coming on short notice. Of course.
I placed my laptop on the table, calm and professional.
Richardson's eyes tracked my every movement like a cornered animal watching a predator. Patricia didn't waste time. We've spent the last 48 hours investigating a critical security vulnerability in our passenger data systems. A vulnerability that, according to federal investigators, could have resulted in the largest data breach in airport history. She turned to Richardson. Care to explain how this happened under your supervision? It was a routine patch installation. Richardson started, his voice tight. Standard procedure. There's nothing standard about installing an outdated security patch that opened a vulnerability in a live system, the FBI cyber investigator interrupted. He was younger than I expected, with the exhausted look of someone who'd been working non-stop. Mr. Richardson, according to system logs, this patch was implemented by, he checked his notes, Kevin Johnson, who your own records show has minimal cybersecurity training. Johnson is a qualified. Johnson has a 2-year associate
degree and exactly 0 certifications in network security. Margaret cut in smoothly.
She slid a document across the table.
Miss Chun, by contrast, has a master's degree in computer science, 6 industry certifications, and 4 years of spotless performance reviews. Until you terminated her employment 17 days ago.
Richardson's jaw clenched. That termination was based on departmental restructuring. Restructuring that happened to target your only employee of color? Patricia's voice could have frozen helium.
The same week you posted on LinkedIn about addition through subtraction and traditional industry standards.
I opened my laptop. If I may? Patricia nodded. The conference room screen lit up with my presentation.
First slide. A timeline of system failures, each one marked with a red dot. Before my termination, virtually nothing.
After,
a cascade of problems that looked like a cardiac arrest on a heart monitor.
These are objectively documented failures, I explained, keeping my voice neutral. Baggage system crashes, security checkpoint malfunctions, passenger data errors.
Each one represents a maintenance protocol that was either ignored or improperly executed after my departure. Second slide, financial impact. $847,000 in costs over 17 days. Consulting fees, overtime, delayed flights, passenger compensation, and emergency repairs. Richardson shifted in his seat.
Those numbers are inflated.
They're from your own accounting department. Margaret placed another document on the table. We subpoenaed them yesterday. Third slide, the evidence I've been saving.
Security footage of Richardson's parking garage meetings.
Email chains about departmental culture. His expense reports showing strip club charges billed as client dinners.
Jesus Christ, Patricia muttered. But I wasn't done. Fourth slide. Richardson's unauthorized access to personnel files.
Every time he'd searched for policy violations by employees of color. Every disciplinary write-up he'd fabricated or exaggerated. All time-stamped, all documented.
This one's my favorite. I clicked to the next image.
An email from Richardson to HR, sent 3 days after he became director. Need to discuss restructuring IT department. Current demographic composition doesn't align with department image and client expectations. Suggest we develop exit strategy for Chen and focus recruitment on more traditional candidates. The room went silent. You documented this?
Richardson's voice cracked. He looked at his attorney, who was staring at the screen in horror. I documented everything. I met his eyes directly. Every discriminatory comment.
Every policy violation. Every instance of financial fraud. It's all backed up, time-stamped, and legally obtained during my employment when monitoring these systems was literally my job responsibility. Margaret leaned forward. Mr. Richardson, you're facing a civil rights lawsuit with overwhelming evidence. But that's actually the least of your problems right now. The FBI investigator took over. The security vulnerability created by your department put approximately 240,000 passenger records at risk. Social security numbers, credit card data, passport information.
We're talking potential federal charges for negligence in protecting sensitive information. Richardson's face went from red to white.
I didn't personally install that patch. No, but you fired the person whose job was to prevent exactly this kind of mistake, then replaced her with someone unqualified, then failed to implement any oversight. The investigator's tone was clinical. The FAA is also investigating operational failures in systems that coordinate with air traffic control. That's a safety issue that could result in the airport losing federal certification. This is ridiculous. Richardson slammed his hand on the table. I was trying to improve efficiency. Chun was insubordinate. She questioned my authority. She questioned your incompetence. Patricia cut him off. And she was right to do so. Margaret opened her folder. We have 17 current and former employees willing to testify about Mr. Richardson's discriminatory practices. We have James Patterson, the former IT director, prepared to explain in detail how Ms. Chun's termination violated every principle of sound operational management. We have federal investigators documenting security and safety violations. We have financial records showing fraud. She smiled pleasantly. How would you like to proceed? Richardson's attorney whispered urgently in his ear. I think, Patricia said slowly, we need to discuss immediate corrective actions. Mr. Richardson, you're suspended effective immediately pending full investigation. Miss Chun, we'd like to offer you immediate reinstatement with back pay, a formal apology, and a significant compensation package. She's not coming back to work for you, Margaret said before I could speak. But we're willing to discuss a settlement that acknowledges the severe harm done to Ms. Chun's career and reputation. The negotiation took 3 hours. By the end, I had a settlement of $500,000 for discrimination and wrongful termination. A formal letter of apology from the airport. Glowing references acknowledging my role in building their IT infrastructure. And most satisfying, Richardson's forced resignation, with all his violations documented in his permanent record. As we packed up to leave, Richardson tried one last time. You know this will ruin me. My career, my reputation. I looked at him, really looked at him. This man who'd seen me as nothing but a diversity problem to be eliminated. Who'd destroyed my sense of security and self-worth. Who'd celebrated publicly when he fired me. Mr. Richardson, I said quietly. I didn't ruin your career. You did. I just documented it. Outside the building, Margaret shook my hand. You handled that perfectly. Calm, professional, devastating. I just told the truth. That's the most devastating thing you can do to a liar. She smiled. So what's next for you? I looked back at the airport, at the building where I'd spent 4 years proving myself over and over, never quite being seen. I've had 3 job offers this week. One from a cybersecurity firm that heard about the case. One from a tech company in California. And one from James. He wants to start a consulting business focused on airport security systems. Which are you taking? I thought about my parents, about staying quiet and keeping your head down. About the cost of speaking up and the cost of staying silent. All 3, in a way. I'm starting my own company, cybersecurity consulting for transportation infrastructure. James will be my senior advisor. I pulled out my phone and showed her the website I'd been building. Chun Security Solutions. We launch next month. Margaret laughed. From fire to entrepreneur in 3 weeks. That's one hell of a story. It is. I glanced back at the building one more time, where Richardson was probably cleaning out his desk. And if you're following this journey and want to see how I built a business from the ashes of betrayal, make sure you're subscribed because the best revenge isn't destroying your enemy. It's becoming so successful they become irrelevant. My phone buzzed. Text from Jennifer. Lily, everyone's talking about what happened. Richardson's gone. They're offering massive consulting contracts to fix everything. Please tell me you're considering it. Another text, this one from Agent Williams at TSA. Heard the news. Coffee sometime? Several people here want to learn from you about what happened. And one more, from an unknown number. Ms. Chen, this is Patricia Morrison. Unofficial communication. Thank you for handling this with such professionalism. You would have been within your rights to let that security flaw explode into a disaster. Instead, you protected passengers. That says everything about who you are versus who Richardson is. The airport board would like to name our new cybersecurity training program after you. Details to follow. I stood in the parking garage, the same one where I'd been escorted out 2 weeks ago, and realized something profound. Richardson had tried to erase me from the airport story. Instead, he'd written me into it permanently. Not as the employee who got fired. As the professional who exposed corruption, prevented a disaster, and refused to let discrimination define her worth. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the concrete. Somewhere above, planes took off and landed, their systems running on infrastructure I'd built, protected by protocols I designed. They tried to subtract me from the equation. Instead, they'd just proven how essential I'd always been. 6 months later, I stood in front of a classroom at MIT, guest lecturing on cybersecurity ethics. The question isn't just about technical competence, I told the students. It's about what you do when systems fail, both computer systems and human systems. When discrimination and incompetence intersect, the consequences affect real people. Chin Security Solutions had grown faster than I'd imagined. James and I had hired 4 consultants, secured contracts with 3 major airports, and just signed a partnership with the Department of Homeland Security to develop new security protocols. The irony wasn't lost on me. Richardson's attempt to eliminate me had accidentally launched a career more successful than anything I'd planned. My phone buzzed during the break. Email from Jennifer. Lily, you need to see this. She'd forwarded a news article. Former Denver Airport IT director faces federal charges in fraud investigation. I scanned the text. Richardson had been indicted for falsifying expense reports and accepting kickbacks from contractors. The investigation that started with my discrimination case had uncovered a pattern of corruption spanning 3 years. Maximum sentence, 7 years federal prison. Is that the guy? One of my students pointed at my laptop screen. That's him. Did you know he was doing all that illegal stuff when you reported him? I suspected financial irregularities. But I reported him for racism and incompetence. The fraud was just bonus karma. The class laughed. The lesson here is that people who operate without integrity rarely limit their unethical behavior to one area. Discrimination, corruption, negligence, they're symptoms of the same character flaw. After class, James called. Did you see? Yeah. How do you feel? Honestly. Validated. I knew something was wrong with that guy from day one, but couldn't prove it. He paused. You coming to Denver next month for the ceremony? The airport was dedicating their new cybersecurity training center. The Lily Chen Center for IT Excellence and Ethics. Patricia Morrison had insisted, despite my protests. I'll be there, I said. The ceremony was scheduled for December 15th, exactly 1 year after my termination. 2 weeks before the event, I received a letter. Handwritten, forwarded through Margaret's office. Dear Miss Chen, you don't know me, but my daughter works in IT. She's Chinese American like you. Last year she was passed over for a promotion she deserved. She was devastated and ready to quit. Then she heard about your case. She read everything, the interviews you gave, the court documents, the articles about your company. She decided to file her own complaint instead of walking away quietly. She won. She got the promotion plus back pay. She calls you her hero. I'm writing to say thank you. Your courage gave my daughter courage. You showed her that speaking up isn't career suicide, staying silent is. You proved that competence and integrity matter more than playing it safe. My daughter is thriving now, and she knows it's because someone like her stood up first. So thank you. From a grateful father. Robert Lin, Seattle WA. I read it 3 times, then called my mom. You were right, I told her. About what? About working twice as hard. But you were wrong about keeping your head down. Sometimes you have to stand up, even when it's terrifying. She was quiet for a moment. Then, I'm proud of you, Lily. So proud. The dedication ceremony was everything I'd been avoiding: attention, speeches, recognition. But standing there, cutting the ribbon on a training center designed to prevent other people from experiencing what I'd experienced, I understood something fundamental. Richardson hadn't just tried to fire me. He'd tried to send a message. People like me didn't belong. Keep quiet, know your place, be grateful for whatever scraps we give you. By refusing to accept that message, I'd sent a different one. We do belong. Our voices matter. Our expertise is valuable, and we will not be erased. Patricia Morrison gave the opening remarks. The Chen Center represents our commitment to excellence in both technology and ethics. It's named for someone who demonstrated that true professionalism means protecting systems and people, even when there's no benefit to yourself. Agent Williams spoke next, representing the TSA employees. When Lily worked here, we took for granted that things just worked. Security systems, baggage tracking, passenger data all running smoothly because someone was doing their job brilliantly and quietly. We didn't appreciate it until it was gone. This center ensures we never forget that lesson. Then James stood up. I hired Lily 4 years ago because she was the best candidate I'd interviewed in 30 years. Not the best minority candidate. Not the best female candidate. The best, period. He looked directly at me. What Richardson did to her was evil, but what she did in response was extraordinary. She could have sabotaged systems. She could have let that security flaw explode into disaster. Instead, she protected passengers, documented truth, and built something better. That's the difference between revenge and justice. They asked me to say a few words. I looked out at the audience. Airport employees, IT professionals, journalists, my parents sitting in the front row. Mom was crying. Dad was recording everything on his phone. A year ago, I lost my job because someone decided I didn't fit their image of what an IT professional should look like. It was devastating. It made me question everything, my skills, my worth, my future. I paused. But here's what I learned. When someone tries to diminish you, they reveal their own limitations, not yours. Richardson saw my race and gender before my competence. That's his failure, not mine. The best revenge, the only revenge that matters, isn't destroying the person who wronged you. It's becoming so undeniably successful that their opinion becomes irrelevant. It's building something so meaningful that their attempt to erase you only makes you more visible. I gestured to the center behind me. This building, my company. Every student who'll learn cybersecurity here, this is what happens when you refuse to accept someone else's limited vision of your worth. Richardson tried to write me out of this airport story. Instead, my name is now literally on the building. The audience applauded. I saw Jennifer wiping her eyes. Agent Williams giving me a thumbs up. But the moment that mattered most came afterward, during the reception. A young woman approached me, nervous. Ms. Chen, I'm Sarah. I just got hired in the IT department. I'm the first black woman in this division. She hesitated. I'm scared I'll face what you faced. I took her hand. You might. Racism didn't end because one person got fired. But here's what's different now. You're not alone. You have people watching out for you. You have documentation protocols. You have a training center that teaches ethics alongside technology. And you have proof that speaking up can lead to justice. But what if they fire me anyway? Then you take everything you've learned, every skill you've developed, and you build something better. They can fire you from a job, Sarah. They can't fire you from your talent. I smiled. And trust me, the people who underestimate you are giving you a competitive advantage. While they're not taking you seriously, you're learning everything they know. By the time they realize their mistake, you're already 3 steps ahead. She smiled back, stronger now. Thank you. As she walked away, I thought about Richardson. Last I'd heard, he was awaiting trial, unemployable, his reputation destroyed. His LinkedIn profile where he'd once celebrated firing me was deleted. His Twitter account gone. He'd been erased from the industry he'd dominated for 15 years. I didn't feel satisfaction at his downfall. I felt nothing. He'd become irrelevant. That night, back in my hotel, I opened my laptop and looked at Chen Security Solutions calendar. Meetings scheduled through next year. Speaking engagements at conferences. Training contracts with government agencies. A waiting list of clients. My phone buzzed. Text from David, my ex-boyfriend. Hey, saw the article about your company. Congrats. Maybe we could grab coffee sometime? I deleted it without responding. Some bridges you burn. Some you simply stop maintaining. I opened a new document and started typing notes for a presentation I'd give next month at a conference on workplace discrimination in tech. The title: From Fired to Founder, How Surviving Injustice Built My Business. Because here's the truth they don't tell you about revenge. The best kind doesn't destroy your enemy. It makes them irrelevant. Richardson spent years trying to prove I didn't belong. Now he's the one who doesn't belong to this industry, to this profession, to the future he tried to gatekeep. And me? I'm teaching the next generation. Building systems that protect vulnerable data and vulnerable people. Creating opportunities for others who've been underestimated. I didn't just survive what he did to me. I used it as fuel to build something he never could. A career based on competence, integrity, and the radical belief that everyone deserves a chance to prove their worth. A year ago, Richardson looked at me and saw someone to eliminate. Now, when people look at me, they see someone who turned discrimination into determination, termination into transformation, and hatred into a foundation for something meaningful. The best revenge isn't becoming like your enemies. It's becoming so completely yourself that their attempts to diminish you only highlight how small they always were. If you've made it this far in my story, maybe you face something similar, someone who tried to make you feel less than you are. Here's what I want you to know. Their limitations aren't yours. Their fears aren't your ceiling. Their prejudice isn't your truth. Take what they tried to use to break you and build something unbreakable. That's not just revenge. That's justice. And if this story resonated with you, if you've ever been underestimated and came out stronger, share it. Because somewhere, someone else is sitting in their car after being fired, wondering if speaking up is worth it. Let them know it is. It absolutely is.